Thank you very much again, Mark. The cultural diplomacy, of course, is something that has to be learned and practiced and excelled throughout the studies and the practices, etc. Now, we are in the presence of very valuable panelists who could tell us what are the examples that we can be inspired from in the Arab world. Of course, we have guests from Southeast Asia as well, and they may look at the Arab world from outside, and they may give also the examples of their own country, how the cultural diplomacy, what are the best examples in their country of the cultural diplomacy. And with your permission, I would like to begin with His Excellency President Constantinescu. President Constantinescu is a very prominent figure in the Balkans, but also in the entire world. His contribution to the work of the Institute is invaluable because he has done so many things, and he is the main pillar of the Institute. And I would like to ask the question first to him, how he sees the exercise of the cultural diplomacy in the Arab world. Are there lessons that we can learn from? And what could be done better in light of what is being done at present?
Thank you, Chairman. But before talking about practice and cultural diplomacy, it's important to come back to the concept of cultural diplomacy, to have a clear understanding. Why do you need a cultural diplomacy? This new concept the Institute Cultural Diplomacy of Berlin tries to promote with such devotion and commitment. My answer, because the world is changing. And if the world is changing, politics in its high signifying community interest service should change too. So we are now in Germany, and we remember the famous Prussian strategic theorist Clausewitz. Clausewitz thought that war is a continuation of politics using other means. In my opinion, and I believe that peace also may be a result of the politics led with other kind of means. One of these means is cultural diplomacy, which, without aiming to remove the traditional diplomacy of dialogue between different interests and supported by different kind of pressures, as well as force threatening, can enrich it with a new element, dialogue based on understanding the other. And in the wider meaning, I talk about a better understanding of the world we live in. In my opinion, the first step of the cultural diplomacy should be to make a conceptual map of the international political universe, including Arab world. On it, we could draw the different worlds populating our planet, the post-modern, the modern and pre-modern ones. Only on such a foundation we can build politics and security strategies proper for a fastly changing and contradictory world. What now, after Arab Spring, the Arab world becoming to be extremely complicated. And in many politics, from United States, European, have a simplified image, but it's completely different between maybe Tunisia. Tunisia, I have experience because I was a chairman of a commission in election for the parliament of Tunisia after Tunisian Spring, Tunisian Revolution. I met the president, prime minister, all that, but I met especially people, and I know this extraordinary intellectual elite in Tunisia. I was in Francophonie many times in Tunisia, but in Libya it's completely different. It's a tribal society, but in Tunisia don't have mineral resources. In Libya having oil. Egyptian also, Egypt. I know very well Egypt. I was many times in Egypt, and has also intellectual elite. In other country is different, and is what I said because is a different. The world is flat, but is a false between different, and is a very complicated to understand what is specific in each country. And was the same after the fall of a communist dictatorship regime in Central Southeastern Europe. Idea was a former communist country. And Havel, my friend, former president of Czechia, said, it's like a former colonialist country. After 26 years, continue to be former communist country. It was a difference between Ukraine and Czechia and Slovakia and Romania. Cultural diplomacy obliged to understand complicated situation in different countries because for each country we need to have solution adapted to complicated realities.
Thank you very much. Now I will turn to, I will follow with this order. Grand Mufti Skender Bruçaj. Bruçaj is, yeah. Skender, you studied, you come from a Balkan country, but you studied in a secular country, Turkey, and you speak Turkish better than me. And you have this advantage of what Madam was referring to, the secular approach to Islam. And to what extent Arab countries can implement this in their respective countries, or if they cannot, what are the solutions? What is your opinion on that subject?
Chairman, thank you for introduction. And before starting my points, actually I studied in Turkey and I'm Albanian, and my wife is Turkish, so I met cultural diplomacy. It is not easy to do that at home, but it is beautiful when you try to understand, to approach people. If they are even different, they have the different culture background. I want to give my example from Albania. Albania is a small country in Balkans, but has a different history, more than 3 decades experienced the more hardest communism period, that we were the only atheistic country in the world, and even we have that is a museum, so, and was not allowed to believe in God with constitute. So, but thanks God, in 1991, when the democracy came, people, they eager to learn about the religion and to learn something about the spirituality. And during that period, a lot of associations and people from Arab world, they come. That the people that they did not know was, they mixed the culture with the religion. So many young Albanians, for them, it was very hard to understand if it is part of religion or it is part of culture. For example, if my friend that is Kuwaitian, he started the morning with tea, and I started with espresso macchiato. So, but there are a lot of things that we mix together. And after the second decade, friends from Arab world, they understood that it's very important to promote culture, values, And because not 100% of Albanians are Muslims, so if you do not separate the culture from religion, maybe people can put barriers between you, and it is very hard to communicate with other people. Sometimes culture can create breaches between people, and they can understand each other more better, even can understand better your religion. So it's very important when you create breaches between cultural values. And for example, you visited the Tirana, you will see, we call the Ibrik for coffee, near the city. Just they are building as a symbol of cultural diplomacy, to show people that we have something to give to them, some points, some signals to bring people together. And it is very important when we focus on what brings people together. So I know that the latest situation, for most countries that has Muslim majority, there are a lot of problems. But I think to some extent we fail, as a Muslims, we fail to show in reality the Muslim values, what is really needs, what is really to be a Muslim. And in Albania, in the last decade, in 2001, a different approach came from many Muslim countries, Arab countries. At the same time, they focus, they invest in cultural diplomacy, they create bridges, they try to show what can bring people together, a lot of cultural bridges. So it's the new approach, not a missionary approach, because when you deal everything to missionary approach, people can put barriers, but even in the war, people can like the music of each other, or can some arts and some exhibitions. So the new approach of cultural diplomacy maybe can create bridges to understand people, even to know more better, and not to put barriers, even if they share different religious background.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to Mr. Al-Ghasani. Mr. Ghasani is the Deputy Chairman of the Majlis Shura Council of Oman. Oman is a country that I visited several times when I was serving as ambassador in Saudi Arabia. I felt that Oman has turned its back to Arab world and looks in the ocean, India, Africa, wider perspective. Not only geographically, but mentally also they are very open. So your assessment about what is taking place in Arab countries will be more valuable because of being Omani. It's a privilege, of course, because you follow a policy in the Arab world which is different from many Arab countries. So what is your assessment?
Thank you, Your Excellency. I like his amendment example. First step for cultural diplomacy is to close borders for marriage. So we are ready for the next marriage to promote cultural diplomacy. Your Excellency, Oman never turned back its back to Arab world. We are definitely part of the Arab world, and we are deeply rooted in the Arab world. But being situated in that location, we are open to all over the world. We have good tie relation with different countries because of our location. Easy to cross Arab Sea to the Eastern Africa, and east also to India, Pakistan, and all over the world. Our sailors, Omani sailors, have reached China and even the United States. The first ambassador in the Arab world is an Omani, crossed the oceans to reach the United States. So that type of, I would say, culture rooted deep in our country makes us open to other people's experiences. We learn from them, and we also maybe we give them our examples and how to live together and peacefully in harmony. Maybe the strength here of the Omani society, we have different sects, Shia, Sunni, Abadi, all different. Why we never had any problems in living together? I think we all agreed, all Omanis, we agree on the complete general principles of Islam. No questions about that. We respect Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and Quran as well. Either the sex never spoil the harmony, never spoil security, because sex are subject to interpretations and opinions. So with that values in the society, we keep our solidarity, and that's a very good example. We never had any problems in living together. You never tell from which sex you are. So this is the strength of the Omani society. This is the example maybe we can spread outside our borders.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to my neighboring country, to Mr. Al-Asadi. Dhiaa Al-Asadi is Member of Parliament of Iraq, leader of the Al-Ahrar Bloc.
Thank you.
Your intervention and your question was very pertinent. Now you may also show us how you see the relations between Arab or non-Arab countries of the Middle East as regards to each other.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you very much for the Institute for hosting this wonderful meeting. If you allow me to go back to my nature, which is academic, before I was a politician, and it is the role of all, it seems, the role of all academics to problematize the obvious. So I'm just wondering if we are talking about a conceptual framework or a concept without relating it into its practical side. Are we talking about something similar to nuclear physics or quantum mechanics that cannot be understood or embraced by everybody? Talking about cultural diplomacy, are we talking about a specific topic that should be embraced by a scientific community that is not used by the layman, by ordinary people? Or is this something that is related to the lives of ordinary people and that can be utilized by everybody? In fact, if we are talking about such a topic, I mean, if it is related to ordinary people, to the layman, then we have to think about the best practices that those ordinary people can use cultural diplomacy. How can the layman be taught, trained, or whatever? And I mean, what are the means to train people to use cultural diplomacy in order to coexist, to tolerate each other? And is it a subject that is to be used by regimes, by institutions like educational institutions, media institutions, or is it something that is to be used by families and family members or by tribes? If we are talking about such a topic that is very relevant to ordinary life and ordinary human beings, then we have to think about what are the models according to which, I mean the theoretical models, according to which we have to put such a concept so that we can adopt it, we can train it, and we can teach it. The problem is really, I think I'm going to take one part of this problem, which is an epistemological problem. It is related to how we think. If we talk about the dominant framework, theoretical framework in the Arab region, obviously it is religion and it is Islam, because not only the mentality, but even the social network, the social relationship network, how social relationships are built, are all dominated, governed by Islamic patterns of thinking and by Islamic teachings. And because Islam plays such a vital and an important role, we have to take into consideration what role can Islam play in promoting cultural diplomacy. And how can we benefit from this very dominant theoretical framework, which is Islam, in promoting the coexistence of people living together. And approaching this actually concept from a Western viewpoint would be very much different from approaching it from a non-Western, let us say Eastern or otherwise. Because in Western epistemology or philosophy, religion is part of sociology, for example, or it is part of culture. While for Muslim mentality, religion is a dominant framework of thinking. It is a dominant worldview. We see the world through the arena or the window of Islam, which is not the case in the social sciences in the Western world, because I mean, religion is a component of culture, just like costumes, just like food, just like folklore. So it is not only a practical problem, it is a mental and it is a theoretical problem. We need to contextualize this concept in a theory that is in conformity, in agreement with how the Muslim mentality is built, with how the Muslim theoretical framework is built. Otherwise, we are talking about something theoretical, just like we are talking about physics to somebody who's not knowledgeable or who has nothing to do with physics, with the quantum physics or advanced mathematics. Then we come to the fact that in order to promote cultural differences and cultural diplomacy, we also need to consider the factors that are negatively affecting the promotion of cultural diplomacy. I've just talked about the external factors because our region, the Middle East, is under a huge, tremendous impact of external factors. We shouldn't be shy of considering things that are affecting our region, policies that are affecting our region. We have to be transparent and talk about things as they are. There is an international will practiced by superpowers, by international powers, in order to form the region in a different way. That is for example, the New World Order that is adopted by the American administration, or the New Middle East, which is not only imposing a new geographical boundaries or reforming the region, but even reforming the mentality of the people who are living in the region. So there is a sort of power and there is a counter power, a resistance to this power. Whatever teachings or practices or skills that are being tried by international institutions and just like this esteemed institution and the big effort that it is trying to put in order to bring people together will be resisted by the people who are living in this area, thinking that there is a sort of domination, subjugation, and hegemony practiced by another bent of mind, by another philosophy, by another framework that is not relevant to the way they live or to the way they think. That's why we need to make this sort of balance and equilibrium between how we think about the subject theoretically and how it can be implied or applied practically. And I think in my country, the case is very, very much clear. Despite the fact that Iraq is called the cradle of civilization, it is the place where the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Assyrians have grown and their dynasties have grown and the kingdoms have been established. Despite the fact that it is in the biblical heritage, it is one of the places, the rare places in the world where prophets originated and generated their missions and messages to the world. It has been systematically destroyed since the 1960s because of the will and appetite of certain superpowers to intervene in the region. Maybe because of as they call it, the curse of oil, maybe because of the political problems, maybe because of the Israeli-Arab conflict, maybe because of the will of the superpowers to divide the region in a different way than it was divided in Sykes-Picot, for example, Sykes-Picot agreement. So all these factors are affecting the stability of the region, hence affecting the promulgation and promotion of cultural diplomacy. And these factors should be dealt with. It is the role of this esteemed panel to diagnose and to suggest how can we actually heal, because our professor today said that the extremism and the very destructive ideas, just like a virus, they spread in the air and they destroy everything. So we need to think about how to heal these wounds and how to fight the viruses and put treatments for them. Thank you very much.
A short comment.
Yes, please.
Yes. My destiny, I have occasion to know very well psychology of Iraqian and other Arabian, because in my quality of professor of geology, I have had many students, 100 students, especially from Iraq and Egypt and other countries. And after the fall of Saddam Hussein regime, few years after, American journalist asked me, you know, Iraqis, why it's so difficult to install the model of Western democracy in Iraq? And my answer was, the problem from Iraqi is not democracy, it's a model.
Yeah. And of course, what you said, Mr. Al-Asadi, regarding going deeper to diagnose the problems, we have to organize perhaps, and Mark may organize meetings with narrower scopes, not cultural diplomacy, which is a very general subject, but narrow down the subject and then invite scholars that are specialized in that particular field and go deeper into the question, and we may devise perhaps solutions. Mark, I understand that we don't have the former Minister of Education of Lebanon here. Is he absent?
That is correct. He's joining us a little bit later, so we don't have that. And just so you know, Mr. Yakis, I was just given a message that the Pakistani embassy would like to begin setting up at 6:30, but I'm trying to see if we can negotiate it, because otherwise we have no chance. But let's continue. But just so you know, there may be a time issue. I'm trying to arrange that we have a little bit more time, but just so you know.
Three speakers, if they stick themselves to the limit of 3 to 4 minutes, then we may catch the time. So I now invite Mr. Idriss Benarafa, the editor-in-chief of Moroccan Times, to share his assessment with us.
Well, I'm kind of impressed by how each country sees cultural diplomacy through the lenses of its culture, its own culture, and I would say through the lenses of my own culture, which is Moroccan, and which is, as the former late King Hassan II said, it's kind of a branch or a tree where its main branch is rooted in Africa and where its top branch is spread over Europe and the Arab world. I would add the main tree is Amazigh, or Berber, as you mentioned earlier. I do see that the Moroccan people have grasped this cultural diplomacy since, I would say, the 12th or 13th century, when the Jews and Muslims that were expelled from Spain came to live together with Moroccans. And we have a lot of celebrations, both from Jewish people and Moroccans. For example, we had the Mimouna. The Mimouna is a Jewish fest where Jewish people used to come and after celebrating, exchange with their Muslim, I would say, compatriots, their gifts or food or whatever. And it was the same during the Muslim Eid. Muslims used to give to their Jewish brothers, a chunk of, let's say, the meats of the Eid or something like that. So cultural diplomacy for me is a very important thing in the way where you exchange with other people and you're able to give and try to sacrifice yourself a little bit in a way to please the other. So this is how I do perceive cultural diplomacy.
Thank you very much. Madam Zuraida, you shared your brilliant ideas with us, but the emphasis in your brilliant speech was on the perception of how Islam is perceived in your country and by yourself also. If you want to say about the Arab world in general now, rather than the Malaysian perspective, do you have anything to add to what you said in your speech?
Thank you, Your Honorary. But before that, I just want to touch a little bit because from my country we have different ethnicity, about 4 or 5 main ones and 4 or 5 main religions. So, but we are able to sort of live harmoniously because the practice of walladism, which is happening in most of the Muslim countries in the Arab world, that goes also countries like Afghanistan and so on and so forth. The walladism is a bit more aggressive than what is more complex in our than in Malaysia itself or in the South Asian region. But from our perspective, we always question, we ask, why didn't the Arab world get together? Yeah, and get together and find a solution to all these warring nations and so on and so forth, instead of leaving the superpower to control or to impose on their values or to impose on their system on the Arab countries, on this part of the, in the Arab countries. So there's always the concern of us being the minor country, a smaller nation which practice Islam, and Islam is our official religion, and Muslim is the majority in the country, in Malaysia. But ours is not that complex as to that of the Arab countries, because that's where you origin and so on and so forth. Yeah. So, but there's always a question that we ask: why aren't the Arab countries come together, yeah, and find a solution to this warring nation and help to promote understanding, educate them, and also help the poor Arab nations to build and develop their country to a more progressive one. So, because in the recent research, there was, I can't remember the research, the findings that say that the most Islamic nations in the world, you know, countries like Singapore came up second, but it's not an Islamic country. But those Arab countries, they are Islamic country, but they were at the bottom. You know, what, based on universal values, that their practices in professionalism, effectiveness, running the government, scandals, corruptions, is much more less than those in the countries that proclaim themselves to be Islamic countries.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to our last speaker, who is from Djibouti, Mr. Ali Soubaneh Atteyeh, a president of the Legislation Commission and the General Administration of the African Parliamentary Union, deputy of the National Assembly of Djibouti. How do you see, well, you are of course at a juncture which is East Africa and also Arab world, so you can compare better than many others.
Thank you, Excellency, and Excellencies, dear distinguished attendees. First of all, I would like to thank the Institute of Diplomacy for addressing an invitation to the Djiboutian Parliament after the visit of the Speaker of the House here in Germany. I'm honored to take the floor here. I will say that I'm a student here. I have a lot of experienced people who can talk about cultural diplomacy, but according to my young experience, and especially the strategic location of Djibouti at the cross-border between Asia and Africa, we can say that, as I told Mark, by nature, cultural diplomacy is something natural in Djiboutian society, because from ancient times we used to have many identities living and exchanging goods, business, culture. So it's a mixture of a lot of cultures in Djibouti. So we trying in Djibouti to promote peace through cultural peace by organizing seminars about peace for the region. Djibouti is like a harbor of peace, and the only thing we are trying to sell is peace, because we are also surrounded by warring nations, like you say, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. So it's not easy, but we are managing to make the best out of it. And concerning the Arab world, you, Excellency, said the journal thinks that your very interesting speech was so very summarized. So I will say more when I will address my speech, because I arrived just today, and I'm still jet-lagged, but I'm very pleased to listen to the experienced people here about cultural diplomacy. And cultural diplomacy, I think, is the key to bring people together, to harmonize relations between us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark, do we take questions or? Because
well, I had some success with cultural diplomacy. I got us another 10 minutes. So what I would suggest, Mr. Yakis, is I know we have many questions here. I had to rudely prevent some people from asking questions before. If you'd agree, maybe we could allow 4 or 5, questions or comments to come just so we can see what is the pulse of the audience, so to speak, and then we extend as much as we can.
Okay.
Would that be okay? Or?
Okay, fine.
And I remember one of my graduate students is probably angry with me because I didn't let her speak before. So that's going to be ladies first. We'll begin with her, another Egyptian perspective, and then we continue. You were waiting as well, and then we'll try to take as many voices as we can. I'd ask everyone, please try to keep it brief. If you could limit it maybe to 1 question each, that will allow for as many voices as possible to be heard. But ladies first.
Hello, this is Nermeen Al-Ghazali. I'm a student here at ICD. Regarding Mr. Yasir, about the coup in Egypt, I'm speaking on behalf of an Egyptian citizen. I do not represent the embassy here. There's a difference between accepting a coup and defending a coup, and a clarification of the non-existence of a coup in the first place. As an Egyptian citizen, most of the population has went down to take out Mubarak as a president for reasons of corruption. We have given a chance to a representative of a Muslim Brotherhood, and because, again, for reasons of corruption, we have went down for a second time and took him out of power for the second time. And as an Egyptian citizen, again, we have asked for a proper protection. And the only man who was capable of giving this protection that we needed at that time was, in fact, President Al-Sisi. And we called for him, and we asked him to be a president, and this is an obligation on him to be a president, even if he doesn't want to. So this was by no means any coup. And because I've been here for a while and receiving information from the media, I could understand why people outside of Egypt could think it was a coup from misguided information. But this was certainly not, speaking from an Egyptian citizen. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's continue and try to get, again, a number of perspectives, questions, comments. So he was waiting first, and then we'll come back to the back. Okay.
His Excellency, my name is Yar Mohammad Badini. I'm from Pakistan, Editor-in-Chief of Balochistan Today. Sir, my question is, we are talking about the Arab world. If we talk about the Muslim Ummah, we are missing one thing, tolerance. If you ask about what you mean tolerance, tolerance means we are no tolerance for democracy. My question is that when coming in Muslim Ummah, democracy, when coming democracy, then we develop. What do you think about that? Thank you so much.
Now let's make some progress with the gender balance to balance a little bit the panel. So I saw there were 2 ladies in the back with their hands up. Okay.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm currently an intern here. I wanted to ask a question about what you mentioned concerning how political developments can pose an obstacle to cultural diplomacy. And particularly in the case of Turkey, I wanted to know, Mr. Yakis, what would be your take on how the Arab Spring has challenged Turkish cultural diplomacy in the Arab world, particularly in light of strategic depth doctrine? Thank you.
And a few others. I saw there was a hand in the front, Oktar. And raise your hand if you'd like to say something.
Well, again, my name is Oktar Babun. I'm a neurosurgeon from Turkey, TV channel A9, representative of Mr. Adnan Oktar. And I would like to request, actually, to be more specific what we mean with the cultural diplomacy. Cultural diplomacy is correct, of course. I mean, political diplomacy is not enough to solve the problems. But we know there is a fundamental issue of the problems, which there is an ideology of the violence. And everybody knows there's Islamophobia, for example, because of the lack of quality in the Islamic world. The way they dress, the way they behave, they are against arts, science, aesthetics. The women are seen as inferior. There are many fabricated hadiths about beating the woman, hating Christians, killing Jews, and staying away from arts, science, and aesthetics. These doesn't have to do with the real Islam. But to be more specific, how could be the education to solve these problems of radicalism and extremism? That's, the diagnosis has to be correct first, and then the treatment. I'm a medical doctor. The treatment has to be correct also. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Yakis, I will give the microphone back to you, so to speak, and we still have about 10 minutes. So to be good diplomats, let's see if we can do it in 9, and then we can transition well to the Pakistani component of the evening.
Thank you. I prefer that the distinguished panelists first may wish to comment. If they don't have any comment, then I will do it mine. Is there any?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment in regards to the question on the coup, yeah? So from our perspective, as Erdogan and the party was, I'm from the National Justice Party in Malaysia, and we learned a lot from him. How do we manage to capture some seats with the governing party? We appreciate him and his party and the strategy and so on and so forth. We do not, we are against the coup, but however, with the way we see it, that once you are in power, all values gone because you want to retain your power. So this also is happening in my country, where we have the different ethnicity. So where opposition parties are coming in stronger, the ruling party use racial and racist techniques and strategy, you know, to gain votes and to remain in power. So this is something that we have to look into. That, yeah, in order to to retain powers, people tend to forget about cultural diplomacy. They tend to forget about the universal values. They tend to forget about their political commitments, just to maintain the power that they have.
Are there other? Yeah, yes, please.
I just would like to comment on the education. I think Mr. from Turkey has raised. We need to review our educational system, because there where the problem might be. When you talk about extremism, they might not have impact on me at this age, but definitely they will have impact on younger generation. So if we immune our generations from such or bad ideas, then we definitely have a generation where believe in good things, believe in education, believe in science, believe in understanding each other, believe in tolerance. So we need to review our educational system, definitely, and take care of the young generation. Now, as Mr. Yakis has said, I think earlier, those committed the killing recently are all young. Those are open for, bad influence from extreme groups. But I think these people are vacant inside. They lack the proper education to immune them against such beliefs or extremism. So yes, go back to your root. Go back to the early age. Also, cultural diplomacy here. If it hasn't got examples or vehicles to spread, it will not last. We've been repeating cultural diplomacy. So what are the vehicles of cultural diplomacy? I will share with you our experiences, Oman experiences, tomorrow in my speech, that we have fostered since the early 70s when Sultan, His Majesty the Sultan, came to power. From day one, I remember I was 10 years old then. There was an interview with German channel, I think ZDF or something. Yeah. He said, I will use every possible mean, every possible mean to establish relation with all countries. And one of the, of course, means is the cultural diplomacies. And I have 10 examples I will share with you later on, 10 initiatives. Those are the vehicles which promoted Oman, will promote any society and gain the status it's enjoying now in the world. So we have vehicles to utilize. Definitely with that type of vehicles, such an institution like this can benefit from. And we can happily share with you whenever you feel like it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I just would like also to emphasize on the topic mentioned by our esteemed friend. I'm not telling a joke, of course. There is a book taught at the primary level in one of the Arab Islamic world, talking about an episode, historical episode. It says, this companion, prophet companion, blessed be him or peace be upon him, was executed by this companion, blessed him or peace be upon him. So two persons, one is a killer and one is a killed, are both blessed in the same book and taught to the younger people at the primary stage. I think the problem of interpretation, how do we interpret our culture, our legacy, our holy books, is very much important. How we teach people, ordinary people, laymen, people at school, young people, even the grown-up, because there are certain incidents where people who are grown-up diverted to a certain ideology or bent of mind and they become totally destructive. So I think there are interpretations of Islam and there are viewpoints concerning Islam and there are schools in Islam. It is the role of the institutions, the leading institutions in Islam, like in Saudi Arabia, and in Egypt, in Iraq, in Morocco, and other countries. They should agree on which version of Islam is the right version that is really can be used by educationalists, by families, by people who are really concerned about how Islam should be understood. Once those institutions are doing their job, they are playing their role, I think our societies will stabilize and will live harmoniously. Otherwise, if these institutions disagree about the right interpretation or how we should interpret Islam, then they will graduate people full of hatred, full of intolerance, and they will become destructive as well.
Thank you very much. If there is no other panelists, I would like to also add my comments on various questions and the comments that were made. First of all, regarding the coup, military, etc., we have to remember that democracy is not only ballot boxes. That's to say, you let people vote, and if you gained majority, you could do anything. This is not democracy. In Egypt, Morsi was blamed exactly for this distorted definition of democracy, majoritarian approach to democracy. Democracy, if it is majoritarian, that's to say, when I have the majority, I can do anything. This is not democracy. Democracy should be pluralistic, open. When, of course, majority's voice, majority has to be allowed to rule the country, but observing also the worries of the pluralistic society, of all segments of the society. So this is what is missing in many Middle Eastern countries, including my own country, where the elections are carried out in a relatively transparent manner. So nobody challenges the elections, the way elections were held. No rigging in the ballot boxes, but once you are elected, you cannot do everything. And most probably the Egyptian people stood up because the majoritarian approach prevailed in Morsi's mind, and that they resorted to, they invited the military, etc. In Turkey, the vote of the ruling party is about 50, a little above 50%. So with this vote, they are governing the country. And it is criticized for many practices in Turkey. But despite this, when there was an attempt of carrying out a military coup, the entire population stood against the military. So this is a degree of maturity in democracy. I do not claim that Turkey is a paradise of democracy, but it is a certain degree of maturity that everyone who was complaining about the government and the president, etc., but when they compared this with the military coup, they stood against the military coup. So this is a difference that has to be kept in mind. Regarding the, I don't feel very authorized on saying things regarding the intricacies and the details of the religion. In the European Union, there is a theory which says the unity in diversity. And I think you were the one who said that whether people cannot come together and find out what is the best version of Quran and how it should be understood, or shouldn't we leave, in light of various traditions of Prophet Muhammad, Sunnah, that similar concept may be perceived differently by different people, and respect them, and not to try to force them. No, you should believe the way the Imam so-and-so says. No, let him also believe that way. Perhaps he may be right, because these are the Hanbalis and Bukharis are very, sophisticated people. And why couldn't we adopt an approach like the European countries are doing, unity in diversity? Let us preserve our diversities, but let's remain united. Is it possible? I do not know. Shall we conclude with this?
Yes, on that note, as a respect for the next event hosted by the Embassy of Pakistan, we should conclude, but it was really an excellent discussion despite the time limitations. I apologize for that, but I think definitely we benefited from the insights. I have a few announcements, but before I give them, if we could please have a big round of applause for all of the panelists.